back to another week of Tasty Tuesday. This week we're going to be teaching you how to make some of your own spices, and we have one steak or pork rub that you can add onto your kitchen shelves. The great thing about making your own seasonings is that it's very simple, and you can control the amount of salt that you have, as well as control some of the other stuff that they'll put in seasonings to help with, it not caking and things like that. Plus, most of the stuff you already have in your pantry as well, so might as well use it. Also today, after I make my 3 spices that I'm going to show you, we'll post the recipes online as well, but the first 3 people who share this video, I will actually give you the spices that I'm about to make, so make sure you share the video. So I'm going to start with kind of the 3 basic things that I thought people would like to know, or things that are super common when cooking. Especially right before Labor Day weekend, people are going to be grilling and making burgers and stuff like that. So I wanted to give you a few things that you could use for this weekend. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make a taco seasoning. And pretty simple. And I want to also say I'm making 3 different seasonings, and as you can tell, these are kind of your core base spices, and I'll kind of go over them as kind of like I'm making the spice to let you know just simple things that you might want to keep in your pantry. There's some that are less, depending on what kind of foods you're making, they're less common. But to me, the one and only spice that I will always keep in my pantry is garlic powder right here. You can actually, forget about garlic salt, because you can make your own garlic salt. It's a 3-to-1 ratio if you're making the garlic salt. And you can find those recipes all over online, but I can post that as well. But garlic powder is something that kind of goes in everything and enhances every single flavor. But once again, I love garlic. My favorite spice of all is cinnamon. Is not up here, but that's because it's not going to be going into anything. Another one that I would always suggest you have, even if you're not a spicy food kind of person like myself, is red pepper flakes, crushed red pepper flakes. You can put this into anything just to kind of awaken the dish, I want to say. That kind of sounds cheesy, but I'll put it with zucchini noodles, and because zucchini noodles don't have a ton of flavor, if you're mixing it with these crushed red peppers, it will give it a little zest to it, and I really, I like that a lot. Alright, so the first one, like I said, I'm going to do a taco seasoning. And I've got my recipes here so I don't mess this up for you guys. So I always suggest doing it in like a ramekin, and then I have a few jars that I have just sitting around that I've used. These were cinnamon sticks, once again, obsessed. So you can also repurpose these. It's great to repurpose them for yourself, or if you're trying to make a gift for somebody, you can also repurpose them for a gift if you're making homemade seasonings. You can you can make this by the bulk, but I'm actually going to make enough for about 1 pound of meat. So make sure you adjust accordingly if you're making more than just 1 pound of meat. And this taco seasoning, I've made it with turkey and with beef. So either one is a really good use for it. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is, I've got my chili powder. I actually have a big, huge thing from Costco that I got to refill my chili powder in the future. So this is one that I always have on hand. And so it's going to be 1 tablespoon of chili powder. So when doing this, I wouldn't pull out all your measuring, I wouldn't put out all your measuring things at once, because, especially these jars, I love them. They were cute when I got them, but they're not as functional as I would have liked. So you're going to have, I would pull out 3 different measuring. I usually do 1 tablespoon, a teaspoon, and then 1/4 a teaspoon. Because then you can use the 1/4 a teaspoon for the half, or some things just call for a 1/4, so you don't have to bring out every single teaspoon and tablespoon that you have and get them all dirty. So the next thing is going to be, like I said, we're going to be using 1/4. So 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. Like so. I could make this real pretty for you, but... oh, it already smells. I love garlic powder. 1/4 teaspoon onion powder. This one's pretty simple. It's got the chili powder is the most thing. and then you kind of have a fourth a teaspoon of everything else. For the teaspoon of crushed red peppers, once again, you can add as much or not as much as you want of this, and it will make it spicier accordingly. The weird one for taco seasoning is oregano. It's not something that you would definitely normally think is in taco seasoning, but it does give it a really nice flavor. So a fourth a teaspoon of oregano, and seriously, it smells so good when I'm opening all these jars. One of my other favorites that I think needs to be a staple in everybody's home is cumin. So this is going to be 1/2 a teaspoon, or 1.5. So I'm just going to do this. So don't spill it everywhere. There you go. And then salt and pepper is the last thing. So I actually have 2 kinds of peppers over here, and I'll explain why. For just simple recipes like this, I'm going to use the ground black pepper. But when you're making like a rub for like when I'm going to make for the steak or the pork, I'm going to use a little bit more of a coarse ground pepper. And I'll show you how it's pretty coarse. And this gives that kind of a different texture on the meat. So when you're grilling it, it kind of really stays on there. Once again, this is me speaking from somebody who does not like beef or pork, so I do not personally make this, but I found a recipe that kind of mimicked a few of them that you find in the store already. So ground black pepper, it's saying for about a teaspoon of ground black pepper. It'll give that spice, that kick to it. But once again, with pepper and salt, you can add as much as you like or as little as you like. So pepper, and then this one says about 1/2 teaspoon to a teaspoon of salt. So it really kind of depends on what your needs, but you can do this completely salt-free if that is kind of how you're going and you need to do salt-free. You can do that as well, but I always say it depends on the person, so I always err on the caution of safety, or and do a little bit less than what the recipe says for salt, and then I kind of make sure that I taste the food and then add salt as needed. So there you go. You have all the spices in there, and that is everything that goes into a pound of taco, so beef and or turkey. And so I'm just going to make this all up. Like I said, that oregano, oddly, really kind of gives it a nice kick, and just a nice, deeper flavor that you aren't kind of expecting. So I'm just going to pour this in here and make it look all nice. That's always a really nice thing to have in your kitchen, as a funnel. You never realize how much you need it until you don't have one. So this isn't a lot. So like I said, you can make bulk amounts of it, but this would be just for a pound. So, but yeah, it's you already have all the ingredients at home. So much easier to make it. All right, so the next one that we're going to do is we're going to do a fajita. Once again, you will notice that it's almost the exact same recipe, just different amounts. So we're going to start once again with chili powder. So it's going to be 2 teaspoons of chili powder. Let's see if I don't dump this time. Once again, I do, but it's fine. I feel like the Swedish chef on the Sesame Street? No, Muppets, where he's like, that's how I feel right now, as I'm dumping things in here. All right, so I've got 2 teaspoons chili powder. I'm going to do 1.5 teaspoons of ground cumin. This is a good one. So I've done 1 teaspoon, and now to go in with the fourth for that half. I know this might be common to most people who cook all the time, but for some people who are trying to learn, it's kind of helpful just to hear some tips and some tricks. 1 teaspoon ground paprika. This is another one that I feel is kind of underrated sometimes. And I always carry this because I put this almost in everything that I cook as well. So 1 teaspoon. And it gives some nice color. Okay. So that's paprika, and then coriander. Coriander's here. Coriander is an interesting spice that I actually use more than I would think that I do. So this is coriander, and coriander, you also, I know when I had my kind of pre-packaged spices in this spice rack, coriander seeds were included, but this is ground coriander. And if my memory serves me right, it is actually the seed of cilantro. So coriander, about 1/2 teaspoon of that. And once again, the greatest thing about making your own spices is that if you don't like a certain spice, or if you want more of one spice and less of the other, you can adjust 100% according to your taste buds. So this is salt and pepper to taste. And so for me here, usually what I would do is I'm just going to start out, this is fajita, so if I did a half a teaspoon of pepper, you know, that flavor would be fine. But I'm actually most likely going to I would cook whatever I'm going to do, and then afterwards I would add more salt and pepper accordingly, because you can't take salt and pepper back. So you want to make sure that you err on the side of caution. So here is this one. This is going to be your fajita seasoning once again. Just chili powder, cumin, paprika, coriander, salt and pepper to taste. And this is would go for about a pound to 1.5 pounds of meat. And I've actually made this with chicken, so I know for sure it's really good with chicken. But you can make it with beef as well. So I'm going to mix it all right up. So the one thing that you will notice is that because there aren't any other ingredients in just these normal spices, you're gonna have some of this stuff start to cake a little bit. So it'll make like lumps. It's not a big deal, especially if you're about to make it almost immediately or within, you know, a few months. Just make sure that you store it in a really cool, dry area. And so for this guy, I actually have, my sister makes some homemade teas, and so she gave me a nice little jar. So I'm going to use this one for that. But you can put them in plastic bags. What I would do is if you put them in plastic bags and you store them, whatever the case may be, make sure that they're sealed really well, and then I would write the date of when you made them, just so you can keep track of how long, because spices do go bad. So make sure that you don't keep spices for a very long time. So there you go, the fajita. So we've got the taco and the fajita, and then the last one I'm going to do is the rub for the steaks. So this one, because it's a rub and you're going to, usually it will call for a lot more salt. Now this is where I'm going to err on the side of caution. Whoever gets this one, I would say definitely before I give it to you, I'm going to tell you to add more or less salt depending on your taste. The recipe actually called for like 2 tablespoons of salt, which is an ungodly amount of salt. But I know you're putting it on the top and it's going to fall off and such. So for me right here, I'm just going to put a tablespoon of salt, and then you can add more or less as you please. But especially if you're sensitive to salt, I would always err on the side of caution. I know I keep saying that, I'm so sorry, but it is very important. So, so for paprika, we're going to be a tablespoon. So you'll notice with this one, because you do need to add more spices, because you're going to be rubbing it on the meat instead of just adding it into it. So you're actually going to need a lot more seasoning than you would normally. So I'm actually probably doing this, it was a pretty large amount of meat that they were saying for. So I'm going to do these small jar openings, not so great. That's when the 1/4 of a teaspoon comes into handy. So about a tablespoon and a half of paprika. A tablespoon of onion powder and a tablespoon of garlic powder. I need to get more onion powder. I use it a lot. Onion powder. And then garlic powder. Yeah, I used to buy the little jars of garlic powder, but once I found the large one, I'll never be able to go back. Oregano. So oddly again, once again, you'll find oregano, which, you know, for all of us people, most of us just think of this being in an Italian dish. At least I did. So some oregano. And this is where the coarse black pepper will come in. So 1 tablespoon of, it's basically kind of like a tablespoon of almost everything. So we got that coarse black pepper. We got some cumin. So it says to do 1.5 to 1 tablespoon. So I'm going to do a 1/2 tablespoon once again because I'm making this for somebody else. I don't know if they love cumin or don't love cumin. So you can add as much or as little as you want of that. And then the last thing that you would do is actually, oddly, brown sugar. Especially when you're putting it on your steak rubs or pork, you're going to have it, it will help with caramelizing it and really giving that nice sear on the top. You can add it, you don't have to add it. I'm going to probably not add it for the sake of it will retain moisture and potentially make a lot of caking when giving this to somebody. However, I will then let them I'll make a separate baggie for it. But it would just be 1.5 tablespoon of brown sugar. So it's actually not a lot when you think about the pre-made stuff and how much other stuff that goes in there. So I would just mix it up. It always looks so pretty before you mix it up. But like I said, pretty simple to make all of these. There's tons of different recipes online that you can find, and you can make them yourself, which allows you to control almost every single ingredient that's in there, without the artificial stuff that they put in, without the like the caking cellulose stuff that they put in there to help with that. And most of the time you already have all of these in your pantry, so might as well put them to use. Well, thank you for joining us for this week of Tasty Tuesday. Remember, the first 3 people who repost this video will get some of these spices that I have made today. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.